The scent of blood and expensive cologne always arrived before Seung-han did. The November wind cut through Chicago's downtown like a blade, carrying with it the smell of Lake Michigan and promises broken in back alleys. Inside Palazzo Nero, warmth radiated from every corner. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across marble floors polished to mirrors. The murmur of conversation mixed with soft jazz floating from speakers hidden in the walls. Lindsay Carlson moved through the crowd with practiced invisibility. Her black uniform was crisp, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail. At 28, she'd mastered the art of being present without being seen. A skill essential for anyone working in a place where Chicago's powerful came to make deals the world would never know about. She refilled champagne glasses, removed empty plates, kept her eyes down, though she saw everything. The nervous politician in the corner booth, the real estate developer who paid in cash, the lawyer whose clients never saw trial. More water here. A woman dripping in diamonds barely glanced up. "Of course, ma'am." Lindsay's voice was soft, professional. She poured carefully, noting the slight tension in her shoulders. Tonight felt different. The air held something she couldn't name, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. Across the dining room, Seung-han commanded attention near the corner table. At 32, he didn't need to demand respect. People simply gave it. Tall, sharp-suited, his presence filled whatever space he occupied. The dragon tattoo coiling up his neck caught candlelight, seeming to move with each breath. He ran legitimate businesses on paper: construction, import, real estate. But Lindsay knew, like everyone in this room knew, that Seung-han's real power came from shadows the law couldn't reach. Korean syndicates, protection networks, territory carved out with blood and silence. She'd worked at Palazzo Nero for 2 years, just another face among the staff. She needed this job, needed the stability, needed to stay invisible in a city where asking too many questions got you disappeared. But tonight, invisibility was about to shatter. Lindsay. Vincent, the floor manager, appeared at her elbow. His face carried worry lines deeper than usual. "Table 9 needs service." "Now." "Table 9. The corner table. Seung-han's table. I can send Marcus. He asked for you specifically." Lindsay's pulse quickened. "He doesn't know my name." "He does now. Go. Don't make eye contact. Don't speak unless spoken to. And don't mess this up." She approached with water and menus, her face a mask of pleasant neutrality. Seung-han sat with 3 men, all Korean, all watching her with the kind of attention that made her skin prickle. He didn't acknowledge her presence. Just continued speaking to his lieutenant in rapid Korean, his voice cold and dismissive. "이 여자를 봐. 마치 주인을 기다리는 개 같아. 흑인들은 항상 이렇게 순종적이지. Look at this woman, like a dog waiting for its master. Black people are always so obedient." His men laughed, cruel, knowing. Something ancient and furious ignited in Lindsay's chest. She'd spent 15 years running from her father's world. From the Korean he'd taught her at the kitchen table. From the blood that stained her memories. From everything she'd tried to forget. She set down the menu, looked directly into Seung-han's eyes, a violation of every unspoken rule. In perfect, native-level Korean with a Busan accent, she said 3 words that cut like a blade. "걔는 네가 아니야? Isn't the dog you?" The restaurant went cold. Every conversation stopped. Forks paused mid-air. Seung-han's lieutenant dropped his glass, water spreading across white linen like blood across snow. Lindsay didn't flinch. "You think you can insult me because I'm black? Because I serve food?" I understood every word. And I'm telling you now, the only dog in this restaurant is the one who tears others down to feel powerful. The silence was deafening, suffocating. Seung-han stood slowly, towering over her. For a moment she thought he might kill her right there. His hand moved toward his jacket. She saw the outline of a weapon. Instead, he smiled, cold, predatory, fascinated. "What's your name?" "Lindsay Carlson." "Well, Lindsay Carlson." He leaned in close enough that she could smell expensive whiskey and something darker beneath it. "You just made the most interesting mistake of your life." He threw $500 bills on the table and walked out, his men scrambling to follow. Vincent appeared at her elbow, face ashen. "Pack your things. You're done here. Do you have any idea what you just did? But Lindsay was watching Seung-han's retreating figure, watching the way he paused at the door, looked back once, his eyes locked on hers across the crowded restaurant, and something in her gut told her this was far from over. She'd just spoken to a mafia boss in his mother tongue, called him a dog in front of his men, shattered every rule of survival in this city. Why had she done it? Because some insults you swallow, and some you answer, even when answering might cost you everything, especially then. Welcome back, my beautiful souls and kindred spirits. Before we start, go ahead and subscribe, like, and share where you're watching from. It always warms my heart to see our little storytelling family stretch across the world. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you give helps us keep uncovering these unforgettable stories together. So find your quiet place, settle in, and let me take you somewhere you've never been before. Seung-han couldn't sleep. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, Chicago's skyline glittering below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. 3 a.m, and the city still breathed, still moved, still lived, but all he could see was her face, the waitress who'd looked him in the eye, the woman who'd called him a dog in perfect Busan Korean. He pressed his palm against the cold glass, trying to ground himself in something real. His reflection stared back, dragon tattoo dark against his neck, eyes shadowed with something he refused to name. Obsession. It had been 4 days since Palazzo Nero. 4 days since she'd shattered every rule of his world with 3 words. He'd replayed the moment 1,000 times, the way her spine had straightened, the fire in her dark eyes, the accent that belonged to his grandmother's kitchen, to the streets of his childhood, to a world an ocean away. How did a black woman in Chicago speak like she'd been raised in Busan? Behind him, his tech specialist, June, cleared his throat. The younger man looked exhausted, circles under his eyes from days of searching. "Boss, I have the report." Seung-han didn't turn from the window. "Tell me." Lindsay Carlson, 28, born in Atlanta, mother deceased, cancer, 15 years ago. Entered Chicago foster care at 13. Father listed as unknown on the birth certificate. Yoon paused. Her employment history is clean. 2 restaurant jobs before Palazzo Nero. No criminal record, no debt, no gang affiliations. She's invisible. No one is invisible. Seung-han's voice was cold. "Keep going. That's the problem. Before age 13, there's nothing. No school records, no medical files, no photographs. It's like she didn't exist until she appeared in the Chicago foster system at 13. Seung-han turned slowly. Foster system? Her mother was dying, couldn't care for her anymore. Lindsay spent 3 years in state care before aging out. She worked her way through community college, kept her head down, never caused trouble. June hesitated. "It's too clean, boss. People who hide this well are either running from something or protecting something. Or both." Seung-han moved to his desk, where June had laid out printed documents, photographs, timeline charts, everything they could find about a woman who'd made herself disappear. He picked up her employee photo from Palazzo Nero. She was beautiful in a way that didn't ask for attention. Smooth, dark skin, intelligent eyes, mouth set in a line that suggested she'd learned early to swallow words that might get her killed. Hair pulled back severe, revealing the elegant column of her neck. But it was her eyes that held him. Even in this staged photo, taken for a restaurant badge, there was defiance there. Fire banked but not extinguished. "The Korean," Seung-han said quietly. "Where did she learn it? That's what I can't figure out. No record of language classes. No travel to Korea. No Korean adoptive families in her foster placements." Jun pulled up a recording on his phone. "But I had someone at the restaurant that night. They captured audio." He pressed play. Lindsay's voice filled the room, speaking Korean with the precise intonation of Busan's working-class neighborhoods. The accent his father had beaten out of him when they'd moved to America. The accent he still dreamed in. "Kanan diga anya?" Seung-han closed his eyes. It wasn't just fluent. It was native. It was real. "Someone taught her," he said. "Someone who lived in Busan, who spoke it at home, not in a classroom. Someone who wanted her to remember. But who? Her mother was American, father unknown. There's no connection to Korea anywhere in her background. Seung-han opened his eyes, mind racing through possibilities. A black woman with perfect Busan Korean. A father erased from every record. A childhood that didn't exist before 13. She's protecting someone's memory, he said softly, or hiding from it. June shifted uncomfortably. Boss, should I keep digging? She's just a waitress. You could forget about her. Move on. Could I? Seung-han's laugh was bitter. He picked up the photograph again, studying the face that had invaded every quiet moment. Tell me, June, in all your years working for me, have you ever seen anyone look me in the eye and challenge me? No, boss. Have you ever heard anyone outside our organization speak Busan Korean in this city? No, boss. Then explain to me how I'm supposed to forget the woman who did both. He set the photo down carefully, precisely. Find out everything. I want to know what she eats for breakfast, where she goes when she thinks no one's watching, who she calls late at night, everything. And if she's dangerous? Seung-han smiled without warmth. Then I want her close where I can watch her. And if she's innocent? He paused, considering. Then I want to know why she isn't afraid of me. June nodded and turned to leave. And Jun? Seung-han's voice stopped him at the door. Bring her to me. Sir? You heard me. Find her. Bring her here. Don't hurt her. Don't scare her more than necessary. But I want to look into the eyes of the woman who speaks like my grandmother and ask her who taught her to be fearless in a world that should have broken her. After June left, Seung-han returned to the window. Dawn was breaking over Lake Michigan, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. He thought about his grandmother in Busan, the woman who'd raised him until his father had dragged them to America. She'd spoken exactly like Lindsay did. Rough, honest, unafraid. She would have liked the waitress who called him a dog, he thought. Would have laughed and said he deserved it. But his grandmother was dead. His brother was dead. His father was dead. And Seung-han was the last of a bloodline built on violence and silence. Until a woman with his grandmother's accent had looked him in the eye and refused to bow. Who are you, Lindsay Carlson? He whispered to the rising sun. And why do you feel like the answer to a question I didn't know I was asking? The city offered no reply. Only the promise that soon, very soon, he would have her in this room. Would hear her voice speaking his language. Would uncover every secret she'd buried beneath that perfect mask of invisibility. And then he would decide if she was salvation or destruction. Perhaps both. They came for her on a Thursday night. Lindsay was walking home from her second job, a late shift at a coffee shop in Pilsen, when the black SUV pulled alongside her. She'd been expecting it. Had felt eyes on her for days. The weight of being watched, being hunted. She didn't run. Running would only delay the inevitable. Two men stepped out. Korean. Professional. The kind of men who knew how to move bodies without leaving marks. One of them spoke in accented English. Miss Carlson, please come with us. And if I say no, then we do this the uncomfortable way. But Mr. Seung prefers you arrive unharmed. Lindsay looked up and down the empty street. No witnesses, no help. Just the choice between walking into the cage or being dragged. She thought of her father's voice, whispered in Korean during the years before he'd died. Pride is expensive, baby girl. Know when the fight is worth the cost. She climbed into the SUV. The drive was silent. They didn't blindfold her, which meant either they didn't care if she knew where she was going, or they were confident she wouldn't be leaving. Both options were terrifying. She watched Chicago pass by the tinted windows, memorizing turns, calculating distances. The penthouse was downtown, top floor of a building she'd passed 100 times without knowing who owned it. The elevator required a keycard. The hallway was empty, pristine, the kind of expensive silence that money bought. They stopped at double doors, black lacquered wood with subtle gold inlay. One of the men knocked twice, waited, then opened the door and gestured for her to enter. Lindsay stepped into another world. The penthouse was vast, open, designed to showcase the city sprawling below. Floor-to-ceiling windows wrapped the space, making Chicago look like a kingdom laid out for its king. The furniture was minimalist, expensive, all clean lines and dark wood. Art on the walls that probably cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. But it was the man standing at the window who commanded her attention. Seung-han didn't turn immediately. He stood with his hands in his pockets, silhouetted against the city lights, dragon tattoo visible where his collar was unbuttoned, waiting, letting her feel the space, understand the power dynamics. "Thank you, Marcus. You can go." His voice was quiet, controlled. The men left. The door closed with a soft click that sounded like a cell locking. Now Seung-han turned, and Lindsay felt the full weight of his attention. In the restaurant, surrounded by people, he'd been dangerous. Here, alone, he was devastating. Not because of his size, though he was tall and built like someone who knew how to hurt people, but because of the intelligence in his eyes. The way he looked at her like she was a puzzle he was determined to solve. "Sit. I prefer to stand." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Still defiant. "I like that." He moved closer, circling her slowly. "Do you know why you're here, Lindsay Carlson? Because you don't like being embarrassed. I've been embarrassed before. Shot, stabbed, betrayed. I'm still here. No, you're here because you're a mystery. And I don't allow mysteries in my city." Lindsay watched him circle, refusing to turn her head, refusing to show fear. "I'm not a mystery. I'm a waitress who spoke Korean. That's all." "No." He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and something darker beneath. Whiskey, smoke, violence. "You spoke Busan Korean, native level, with an accent that died out 20 years ago. You spoke like someone who learned it at home, not in a classroom. Someone who lived it." He leaned in slightly. "Who taught you?" Lindsay met his eyes. "My father. Your father who doesn't exist on any document, who's listed as unknown on your birth certificate, who left no trace except the language you carry like a weapon." Seung-han's voice dropped. "Tell me about this ghost father. He was real. He's dead now. That's all you need to know." "It's not nearly enough." Seung-han stepped back, gesturing to the apartment. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here, live here. And slowly, you're going to tell me everything about the man who taught you to speak like you were born in the same neighborhood as my grandmother." Lindsay's pulse quickened. "You're kidnapping me. I'm protecting you. You challenged me publicly. Called me a dog in front of my men. Do you think my enemies didn't notice? Do you think they're not wondering if you're connected to me, if you're valuable, if hurting you would hurt me?" He moved to a bar cart, poured 2 glasses of something amber. "Whether you want it or not, you're in danger now. So you can stay here, where I can control the variables, or you can go home and see how long you last." He held out a glass. Lindsay didn't take it. "This isn't protection, it's a cage." "Yes," Seung-han agreed simply. "But it's a cage that keeps you alive. And while you're here, you're going to answer my questions. Starting with this. Your father, black man, fluent in Busan Korean. That's not common. That's not random." His eyes bored into hers. "Was he military? Adopted? Married to a Korean woman?" Lindsay's throat tightened. She'd spent 15 years protecting her father's secrets, protecting herself from the world he'd belonged to. And now she stood in a penthouse with a man who might have known him, might have killed him, might be the reason her father had run. "He was born there," she said finally. "In Busan. His mother was American, military wife. His father was black, serviceman. They stayed after the father was stationed elsewhere. Unusual, but not impossible. He grew up Korean, spoke Korean, lived Korean, until he came to America." Seung-han's eyes widened slightly. "A black man raised in Busan." "Yes. What was his name? Why does it matter? He's been dead for 15 years. "It matters because I need to know if you're connected to my world. If your father was involved in things that make you dangerous to me." Seung-han set down his glass carefully. Last chance. His name. Lindsay calculated the risks. Lie and he'd find out eventually. Tell the truth and risk everything. But her father had changed his name when he'd fled. Mitch Carlson wasn't in any Korean records. Mitch Park had been erased. Mitch Carlson. He died when I was 13. Cancer, officially. But he'd been running from something. He never told me what. It was the lie she'd learned to tell. At 13, he vanished from her life and the world, while he hid her and ran. The truth lived years later, in a hospice room in Atlanta. Seung-han studied her face, searching for deception. You're telling me the truth, but not all of it. I've told you enough. You've told me the minimum required to satisfy immediate curiosity. But I want more. I want to understand how a waitress in Chicago speaks like my childhood. How a woman with no connections to my world knows how to look a man like me in the eye without flinching. He stepped closer. You're not convincing anyone you're just a waitress. And you're not convincing anyone you're in control. The words came out before Lindsay could stop them. You're just scared of what you don't understand. The temperature in the room dropped. Seung-han went very still, the kind of stillness that preceded violence. Lindsay's heart hammered, but she didn't look away. If he was going to hurt her, she'd face it like her father taught her. Standing, defiant. But Seung-han didn't move, didn't explode. Instead, something shifted in his expression. Surprise? Interest. Something almost like respect. You're right, he said quietly. I am scared, because you shouldn't exist, and things that shouldn't exist are either miracles or threats. I haven't decided which you are. Maybe I'm just a woman who learned Korean from her father and had a bad day at work. No, Seung-han smiled, and it was dangerous and beautiful and terrifying. You're something far more interesting than that. And I'm going to find out what. He walked to a hallway, gestured for her to follow. Your room is this way. You'll find everything you need, clothes in your size, bathroom stocked. If you want something specific, tell Marcus. He'll get it. I'm not staying. You are. The doors are locked. The windows don't open. There are 6 men in this building who answer to me. You could try to leave, but we both know you won't make it past the elevator. He paused at a doorway. Or you could accept that for now. This is the safest place in Chicago for a woman who called me a dog. Lindsay walked to the doorway, looked into a bedroom that was bigger than her entire apartment. Luxury everywhere. A cage wrapped in silk and steel. How long? Until I'm satisfied you're not a threat. Or until I understand why you feel like a ghost from my past come to haunt me. Seung-han's eyes held hers. Sleep well, Lindsay Carlson. Tomorrow we continue this conversation. He left, and she heard the door lock click behind him. Lindsay stood alone in her beautiful prison, looking out at Chicago glittering below, and whispered in Korean, I'm sorry, Papa. I tried to stay hidden. I tried to be invisible, but he found me anyway. Or maybe, she thought, maybe she'd let herself be found. Because the man who'd taken her prisoner spoke like her father had spoken, moved like her father's world had moved, and somewhere deep in the lies and the secrets, she needed to know if Seung-han was connected to the night her father died. Even if the answer destroyed them both, days bled into weeks. Lindsay learned the rhythm of her captivity. Mornings she ate breakfast alone in the kitchen while Seung-han conducted business in his office. Afternoons he appeared, asking questions she half answered, circling each other like fighters learning each other's reach. Evenings, he disappeared into the city, leaving her with Marcus and the other guards who treated her like expensive cargo. But nights were different. Nights, Seung-han would return late, smelling of smoke and whiskey and violence. He'd pour himself a drink and stand at those floor-to-ceiling windows, staring at the city like it was a battlefield he'd conquered but never quite subdued. And Lindsay, unable to sleep in her gilded cage, would emerge from her room to find him there. Alone. Guard dropped. It was on the 18th night that everything shifted. She found him at the window as usual, but this time his jacket was off, shirt partially unbuttoned, and there was blood on his knuckles. Not his blood. Someone else's painted across his hands like proof of what he was. You should be asleep, he said without turning. So should you. I don't sleep much anymore. He took a drink, and Lindsay saw his hand shake slightly before he steadied it. Do you know what I did tonight? Nothing I want details about. Smart answer. He turned to face her, and in the dim light, she saw exhaustion carved into his features. The dragon tattoo seemed darker, angrier. I broke a man's fingers because he stole from me. 3 fingers. 1 at a time, he cried, begged, promised to pay back every dollar. Seung-han's smile was bitter. I broke them anyway, because mercy looks like weakness in my world. Lindsay should have been terrified. Should have run back to her room. But something in his voice stopped her. Pain. Buried deep but present. Why are you telling me this? Because you keep looking at me like I could be something other than a monster. And I need you to understand what you're seeing. He set down his glass, moved closer. I'm not a good man, Lindsay. I've killed. I've hurt people. I've built an empire on fear and blood. And I'm not sorry for it. Then why do you stand at this window every night looking like you're trying to remember how to be human? The question landed like a blow. Seung-han stopped, his eyes widening slightly. No one spoke to him like this. No one saw through him like this. You think you know me? His voice was dangerous, soft. I think you're haunted. Lindsay stepped closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. I think you carry ghosts. And I think the reason you can't let me go is because I remind you of someone. Someone who spoke like I do. Someone who's dead. Stop. Your grandmother, maybe. Or someone else from Busan. Someone who made you feel like you could be more than this. She gestured at the blood on his hands. Someone who's gone now and left you alone with all this power and nowhere to belong. I said stop. Seung-han grabbed her wrist, not hard enough to hurt but firm enough to halt her words. They stood inches apart, his hand warm against her pulse, both of them breathing hard. The air between them crackled. Electric. Dangerous. You think you see me? He whispered, his eyes searching hers. But you're just seeing what you want to believe. I'm exactly what I appear to be. Nothing more. Liar. The word slipped out in Korean, and she watched his pupils dilate. Don't. His grip tightened slightly. Don't speak to me like that. Like what? Like someone who isn't afraid? Like someone who sees the man underneath the monster? Lindsay's heart hammered, but she held his gaze. You've kept me here for weeks, asking questions, trying to understand me. But maybe the real mystery is you. Seung-han pulled her closer, and she could feel the tension radiating off him. Violence, and something else. Want. Confusion. The desperate need to connect with someone who didn't see him as a weapon to be wielded or a threat to be feared. You don't know what you're doing, he said, voice rough. Neither do you. For a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Thought he might close that final distance and let whatever was building between them ignite. But instead, he released her wrist and stepped back, running his hand through his hair. Go to bed, Lindsay. What if I don't want to? Then I'll carry you there myself. Because if you stay here, looking at me like that, I'm going to do something we'll both regret. He turned back to the window, shoulders tense. Go. Lindsay should have listened, should have retreated to safety. But something reckless had taken root inside her. Maybe it was the weeks of captivity. Maybe it was the loneliness she recognized in him because she felt it too. Maybe it was the way he spoke Korean like her father had spoken it, making her feel less alone in a language most people didn't understand. Why aren't you afraid of me? He asked suddenly, still facing the window. Lindsay considered the question. Thought about her father, who'd been gentle and kind and had still taught her that fear was a choice. That some things were worth risking everything for. Because monsters are only men who forgot they could be anything else. Seung-han's reflection in the glass showed his eyes closing. And you think I can remember? I think you're trying to. That's why you keep asking me about my father. About where I learned Korean. You're looking for proof that people like you, people from your world, can be something other than what they were made to be. And what was your father? Lindsay's breath caught. The truth hovered on her tongue. Her father had been exactly what Seung-han was. An enforcer. A man who'd lived by violence until he'd chosen to walk away. Until he'd died protecting that choice. He was complicated, she said finally. Like you. Seung-han turned to face her again, and this time when he looked at her, she saw something raw in his expression. Vulnerability. Need. You make me want things I thought I'd buried, he admitted quietly. Like believing I could be seen as something other than this. He held up his bloodied hands. But we both know better, don't we? Do we? This time when he moved, it was slower. Deliberate. He crossed the space between them and stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him. Close enough to see gold flecks in his dark eyes. Close enough that her breath caught. You should hate me, he whispered. I took you from your life, locked you in this place, made you my prisoner. I know, but you don't hate me. It wasn't a question. Lindsay's pulse raced. She should hate him, should be planning escape, plotting revenge. But instead, She saw the man beneath the reputation, the lonely king in his empty castle. The person who'd been shaped by violence but hadn't lost the capacity to question it. "No," she admitted. "I don't." Seung-han's hand came up slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his fingers brushed her cheek, gentle despite the blood still staining his knuckles. The touch was electric, intimate, terrifying. "Then we're both fools," he said softly. And this time, when he stepped back, it looked like it cost him everything. The next morning, Lindsay woke to shouting. Marcus's voice, urgent and sharp. She threw on clothes and emerged to find chaos. Seung-han sat at the kitchen island, his shirt torn, a fresh cut across his ribs being tended to by a man she didn't recognize. "What happened?" she asked. "Nothing that concerns you," Seung-han said, but his voice was tight with pain. "Beck family," Marcus explained. "Ambushed him on the way back. 3 men. They knew his route. Someone had betrayed him. Given up his location, his schedule." Lindsay saw the calculation in Seung-han's eyes, the cold fury of a man weighing which of his people had sold him out. "Everyone out," he commanded, "except her." The room cleared quickly. The man treating his wound hesitated, but one look from Seung-han sent him scurrying. Then it was just them. Again. "You need someone to finish bandaging that," Lindsay said. "I'm fine." "You're bleeding through your shirt, let me help." "Why would you?" "Because despite everything, I'm not the kind of person who watches someone suffer when I can do something about it." She moved to the medical supplies the man had left behind. "Sit down and let me work." Seung-han watched her for a long moment, then slowly sat. Lindsay approached carefully, acutely aware of how close she'd have to get, how intimate the act of touching him would be. She lifted his shirt gently. The cut wasn't deep, but it was long, crossing his ribs in an angry red line. Someone had come very close to killing him tonight. "This will hurt," she warned. "It already does." She cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency. Her father had taught her basic first aid, had insisted she know how to handle injuries without panicking. She'd never imagined she'd use those skills on a Mafia boss in a Chicago penthouse. Seung-han hissed when the antiseptic touched the cut but didn't pull away. She worked carefully, her fingers gentle against his skin. His body was all lean muscle and old scars. Proof of a life lived on the edge of violence. "You're good at this," he said quietly. "My father taught me. Said everyone should know how to patch themselves up. Smart man. He had to be. To survive in your world." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Seung-han's hand caught her wrist, halting her movements. "What did you say?" Lindsay's heart stopped. She'd said too much, revealed too much. "Nothing. I just meant. Anyone who teaches their daughter first aid is probably aware of danger." His eyes bored into hers, searching. "You're hiding something." "We're all hiding something. But your secrets feel bigger than most." He released her wrist slowly. "Finish, please." She applied the bandage, her hands trembling slightly now. When she was done, she stepped back, putting distance between them. But Seung-han caught her hand before she could retreat fully. "Thank you." 2 simple words. But the way he said them, the vulnerability in his voice, made them feel like more, like an admission, like trust. "You think power protects you?" Lindsay said softly, her hand still caught in his. "But power is just loneliness with better clothes." Seung-han's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle touch that contradicted everything he was supposed to be. "Is that what you see when you look at me? Loneliness?" "I see someone who's forgotten there are other ways to be strong." They stood like that for a moment, her hand in his, the morning light washing over them. 2 people from different worlds, drawn together by forces neither fully understood. "Why aren't you afraid of me?" he asked again, and this time the question felt different, deeper. Lindsay squeezed his hand once, then pulled away. "Because monsters are only men who forgot they could be anything else. And you haven't forgotten. Not completely. That's why you keep me here. Not because you think I'm dangerous, but because I remind you that there's still something human underneath all the blood." She left him sitting there, bleeding and beautiful and broken, staring after her like she'd just revealed the one truth he'd been running from. And in the silence of her room, Lindsay pressed her hand to her chest, feeling her heart race, and wondered when exactly she'd stopped being his prisoner and started being something far more dangerous. Someone who cared. The photograph arrived on a Tuesday morning. June found it in a security sweep of Seung-han's office, tucked into an envelope that had been slipped under the door sometime during the night. No cameras caught who delivered it. No witnesses saw anything, just the envelope and the photo inside. Jun stared at it for a long moment before walking to where Seung-han stood at his usual place by the windows. "Boss, you need to see this." Seung-han took the envelope without looking away from the city. He'd been distracted lately, everyone had noticed. Spending more time with the waitress, asking fewer questions about business, smiling at things that shouldn't make him smile. He pulled out the photograph, and everything stopped. The image was old, grainy, taken maybe 15 years ago. It showed a man in his mid-30s, black, tall, with kind eyes and a careful smile. He stood outside a storage facility in Gary, Indiana. Beside him was a girl, maybe 12 or 13, skinny and serious-looking, her posture already carrying the stillness her father had taught her. But it wasn't the subjects that made Seung-han's blood turn to ice. It was the man's face. Mitch Park, the traitor. The enforcer who'd stolen $15 million from the Seung organization. The man whose betrayal had started a war that killed Seung-han's older brother. The black Korean whose name was synonymous with destruction in their world. The man Seung-han had tracked to Atlanta 3 years ago and killed with his own hands. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely above a whisper. It was delivered, no note, just the photo. Jun hesitated. "Boss, the girl. I know who she is." Seung-han stared at the young face, already seeing the woman it would become. The same eyes, the same defiant tilt to her chin, the same mouth that would one day call him a dog in perfect Busan Korean. Lindsay. The floor shifted beneath him. The world narrowed to this single point of devastating truth. The woman he'd been drawn to, who'd challenged him, who'd made him feel something other than cold calculation for the first time in years. The woman whose voice reminded him of home, whose defiance made him want to be better. The woman he was falling for despite every rule he'd ever lived by, was the daughter of his greatest enemy. "Where is she?" he asked, his voice empty. "In her room." Seung-han walked through the penthouse like a man underwater. Everything felt distant, unreal. His hands shook, his chest ached. 15 years he'd hunted Mitch Park. 15 years he'd carried the rage of his brother's death. And when he'd finally found the bastard, dying of cancer in a rundown Atlanta apartment, Seung-han had put a bullet in his head anyway. Mercy killing or execution, he'd never been sure. But he'd made sure the man died, knowing who killed him. Made sure Mitch Park understood that his sins had caught up, and now his daughter was sleeping 20 feet away. He opened her door without knocking. Lindsay sat up in bed, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes wide with alarm at his intrusion. "What?" He threw the photograph on the bed. She looked down, went completely still. When she looked up again, he saw the truth written across her face. The recognition, the fear, the knowledge that her secret had just destroyed everything. "Mitch Park," Seung-han said, voice cold as death. "Tyrell Park. Mitch Carlson. 3 names for the same man. The black Korean enforcer who grew up in Busan, who worked for my father, who betrayed my family, who stole $15 million, who killed my brother." He stepped closer. "Your father." Lindsay's lips parted, but no sound came out. "I didn't know who you were," she finally whispered. "When I started at the restaurant, when I called you a dog, when you brought me here, I swear I didn't know. Liar." The word cracked like a whip. "You've been playing me, challenging me publicly, speaking Korean to make me obsessed. You've been manipulating me from the beginning." "No." She stood, the photograph falling to the floor between them. "I worked at that restaurant because I needed a job. I spoke Korean because you insulted me. You investigated me. You brought me here. I didn't seek you out, but you knew who I was. You knew my family name. You knew what we were. I knew Korean Mafia existed in Chicago. I didn't know you were the Seung family. I didn't know." Her voice broke. "I didn't know you were the one who killed him." Silence crashed between them. "What did you say?" Seung-han's voice was barely audible. Lindsay's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. 3 years ago. Atlanta. My father was dying. Cancer, just like I told you. But one night, someone came to the hospice. Someone who knew his real name. Who knew what he'd done. I was there visiting. I heard the shot. By the time I got to his room, there was blood everywhere and a man walking away. She looked at him, and the pain in her eyes was devastating. I saw your face for maybe 3 seconds. In the hallway. You didn't see me. I was just another visitor, another nobody. But I never forgot. Seung-han felt the ground open beneath him. He'd been so focused on Mitch Park, so consumed with finally ending the hunt, that he'd never thought to check if anyone else was there. Never considered that the traitor might have family watching him die twice. You recognized me, he said slowly. At the restaurant, you knew exactly who I was. Yes. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand, angry at the tears. I knew. But I didn't plan anything. I was just trying to survive. Trying to build a life away from everything my father had been. And then you walked into my workplace and insulted me in the language he taught me, and I just... Her voice broke. I snapped. I answered before thinking, and then everything spiraled. You should have told me. When? Lindsay's laugh was bitter. When you kidnapped me? When you locked me in this penthouse? When you started looking at me like I was something other than an enemy? Tell me, Seung-han, when exactly was the right moment to say, by the way, you murdered my father? He had no answer. Because she was right. There had been no right moment. Just layers of lies and truth tangled too tight to separate. Your father killed my brother, he said quietly. Started a war that destroyed families. Stole everything. My father protected me. Lindsay's voice shook with fury now. He found out about the trafficking, about what your family was doing to those girls from Korea. He tried to stop it. And your brother. She stepped closer, fearless despite everything. Your brother came to kill him, came to murder a man and his daughter to keep the secret. My father fought back. He killed in self-defense. That's a lie. There's a letter, in a storage unit in Gary. My father left everything. Bank records, recordings, proof. She pulled a key from the chain around her neck, threw it at him. It hit his chest and fell to the floor. Go see for yourself. Every dollar he took is still there. He never spent it. He kept it as insurance. As evidence of what your family really was. Seung-han stared at the key on the floor between them. My father was a businessman. My brother was. A trafficker, a monster. And when my father tried to expose it, you hunted him for 15 years like he was the villain. Lindsay's voice cracked. He raised me alone. Taught me Korean so I'd understand where he came from. Taught me to be strong because he knew someday his past might catch up. And then you put a bullet in his head while he was dying anyway. The words hung in the air like smoke, like blood, like everything they'd built between them turning to ash. Seung-han's hand moved to his weapon. Old instinct, old rage. She was Mitch Park's daughter. She'd lied, she'd manipulated. She'd wormed her way into his head, his heart, and all of it was built on the blood between them. He should kill her. Blood for blood. Her father for his brother. End this cycle of revenge that had started before either of them were old enough to understand. But his hand wouldn't move. Wouldn't draw the weapon. Because when he looked at her standing there, tears on her cheeks and defiance in her eyes, all he could see was the woman who'd challenged him, who'd spoken to him like he was human, who'd touched his wounds with gentle hands and told him power was just loneliness, the woman he was falling in love with. I should kill you, he said, voice raw. Then do it. Lindsay lifted her chin. I won't beg. I won't run. I'm my father's daughter. I'll die standing like he did. Seung-han pulled the gun, aimed it at her chest. She didn't flinch, didn't close her eyes. Just looked at him with something that might have been pity. Pull the trigger, she whispered. End it. Blood for blood. Isn't that how your world works? His finger tightened on the trigger. He'd killed dozens of men. Had pulled this trigger without hesitation. Had built his empire on the certainty that he could do what needed to be done. But he couldn't. His hand shook. His vision blurred. And suddenly he was back in that Atlanta hospice, watching a broken old man die, and wondering if revenge had ever actually filled the emptiness his brother's death had left. I can't. The words tore out of him like a confession, like a wound. He lowered the gun, let it fall from his hand. I've wanted to kill Mitch Park's family for 15 years, dreamed about it, planned it, and now that I have the chance. He looked at her, anguished. I can't, because the woman standing in front of me isn't him. She's you, and I. He stopped. Couldn't say it. Couldn't admit the truth that would make everything worse. You what? Lindsay's voice was barely audible. I'm falling in love with you. The confession felt like dying. That's why I kept you here. Not because I thought you were dangerous, but because I couldn't stop thinking about you, couldn't stop wanting to understand you. And now I know the truth, and it makes everything worse because I should hate you, should want you destroyed. But instead, his voice broke. Instead, I just want you to look at me the way you did before you knew what I'd done. Lindsay stared at him, tears streaming freely now. You killed my father. I know. You murdered him while he was dying. Made his last moments terror and pain. I know. Seung-han's own eyes burned. And if I could take it back, if I could unknow what I thought I knew about him, I would. But I can't. Just like you can't unknow that I'm the one who pulled the trigger. The silence between them was infinite, impossible. My father told me once, Lindsay said slowly, that revenge is a circle. It never ends. Someone kills. Someone else kills them. And on until everyone's dead or everyone's too tired to keep killing. She looked at the gun on the floor between them. He said the only way to break the circle is to choose something different. Something harder than revenge. What's harder than revenge? Forgiveness. She met his eyes, or at least choosing not to continue the cycle. Seung-han laughed bitterly. You think we can just forgive each other? Just forget about our fathers and what they did? No, I think we can choose not to let their sins define us. Lindsay took a step forward. Dangerous, brave. I think we can acknowledge that your brother trafficked women and my father tried to stop it. That your brother tried to kill me and my father killed him in self-defense. That you killed my father believing you were avenging your family. And that all of it, was built on lies and secrets and violence. And then what? His voice was hollow. And then we decide if we want to keep being prisoners of their choices, or if we want to choose something different. Like what? She stood in front of him now, close enough to touch. Close enough that he could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes, the curve of her mouth, the pulse beating fast in her throat, like admitting that despite everything, despite all the blood between us, this thing between us is real. Her hand came up, trembling, and touched his chest, right over his heart. You feel it. I know you do. This pull, this impossible connection. Seung-han's hand covered hers, holding it against his racing heart. It doesn't change what I did, no. But it means we have a choice about what happens next. I don't deserve. Neither of us deserves anything. Lindsay's eyes searched his. But maybe that's the point. Maybe love isn't about deserving. Maybe it's about choosing someone despite every reason you shouldn't. Is that what this is? His voice was rough, desperate. Love? I don't know. She was crying again, but she didn't pull away. But I know that when you told me you couldn't kill me, when you admitted you were falling for me, I felt it too. This terrible, impossible feeling that shouldn't exist but does anyway. Seung-han pulled her closer, his other hand coming up to cup her face. We're insane. Probably. This will destroy us. Maybe. I killed your father, Lindsay. How can you even look at me? Because you're not just the man who killed him. You're also the man who's haunted by what he's done, who stands at windows at night trying to remember how to be human, who kept me here because you were lonely, and I reminded you that monsters can choose to be something else. Her hand pressed harder against his chest. And because my father taught me that holding on to hate only poisons the person carrying it, he chose to run rather than kill more people. He chose to protect me over revenge. And I think he'd tell me to choose something other than this endless cycle of blood. What if I can't be what you need me to be? What if I can't be what you need me to be? She leaned in, and he could feel her breath against his lips. What if we're both broken people trying to find something whole in each other? Then we're fools. Yes. She smiled through her tears. We are. The distance between them closed like gravity, inevitable and inescapable. When Seung-han kissed her, it felt like falling and flying at once, like every rule breaking, like choosing something impossible over something safe. She kissed him back fierce and desperate, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. He tasted salt from her tears, felt her heart hammering against his chest, and thought that this was either salvation or damnation, and he no longer cared which. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. "This doesn't fix anything," he whispered against her lips. "I know. We still have to deal with everything. Your father, my brother, the lies, the storage unit, all of it. I know. And it might destroy us anyway. I know." She pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "But at least we'll face it together. At least we'll choose something other than hate." Seung-han kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise, like an apology, like the beginning of something that shouldn't exist but refused to die. When they finally pulled apart, morning light was washing through the windows. The photograph still lay on the floor between them, a reminder of everything they couldn't change. But for the first time in 15 years, Seung-han felt something other than the cold weight of revenge. He felt hope. Terrifying and fragile, but real. "Show me," he said quietly. "The storage unit, the letter, the evidence. I need to know the truth." Lindsay nodded, picking up the key from the floor. And then we figure out how to live with it, together. Because despite everything, despite all the reasons we shouldn't, I meant what I said." He took her hand, threaded his fingers through hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Lindsay Carlson, Mitch Park's daughter, and I don't know how to stop." "Then don't." She squeezed his hand. "Don't stop, don't run, don't hide behind what we're supposed to be. Just stay. Stay with me in this impossible, broken thing, and we'll figure out the rest." Outside, the city woke to another day. Inside, two people from different worlds stood holding hands over the photograph that should have ended everything. But instead of death, they chose the harder path. They chose each other. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead went, two fathers. One Korean and one black, both shaped by violence, both destroyed by secrets, might have looked down at their children and felt something like peace. Because the circle had broken, the revenge had ended, and love, impossible and fierce, had taken root in the ashes of everything they'd burned. The storage unit in Gary smelled like rust and regret. Concrete walls sweated condensation in the humid air. A single overhead bulb cast everything in sickly yellow light, making shadows stretch longer than they should. Lindsay stood at the threshold while Seung-han stepped inside. His shoulders were tense, jaw set like he was walking into combat. Maybe he was. Sometimes the past was more dangerous than any living enemy. She watched him move through the space with careful precision. Boxes stacked neatly along one wall, a filing cabinet in the corner. Everything organized with military efficiency, like her father had known someone would come looking eventually. "Here." Lindsay pulled a box from the top shelf, set it on the concrete floor between them. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were documents, bank statements, photographs, and a letter, sealed in plastic to protect it from time. Seung-han knelt beside her, their shoulders brushed, and she felt him tense at the contact. Everything between them was raw now, exposed. The kiss they'd shared hours ago felt both impossibly close and worlds away. She handed him the letter. Their fingers touched briefly, and electricity sparked between them despite everything. The envelope was addressed in Korean. "To whoever finds this first." Seung-han's hands trembled as he opened it. The letter inside was written in both Korean and English. Switching between languages like her father's thoughts had moved between his two worlds. He read aloud, voice rough with emotion. "My name is Mitch Park, born Mitch Carter, adopted by a Korean family named Park when I was a boy. Later, I took the name Tyrell Park to hide from the world I helped build. 3 names. One man, one truth. I didn't betray the Seung family. I exposed it. For 5 years I worked as enforcer for Seung Jae-won. Good man, I thought. Strong, fair, building legitimate business from illegitimate roots. I believed the family was transitioning, becoming clean. Then I discovered the shipping containers. Young women, girls, some of them, brought from Busan, Seoul, Daegu, promised restaurant jobs, factory work, marriage visas. Instead, trapped in brothels, warehouses, basements where men paid by the hour. Sung Dae-hyun ran the operation, the oldest son, the heir. I went to Jae-won, showed him evidence, begged him to stop it, shut it down. He looked at me with dead eyes and said, "Business is business. You're black and you speak Korean. You're useful. But you're not family. Don't forget your place." I stole the 15 million, every dollar from that operation, moved it here, to this storage unit. Evidence, insurance, proof. Then I went to the warehouse to free them. 17 women, 3 were pregnant, 1 was 12 years old. Dae-hyun came with 6 men. He said my daughter would be next. Said he'd make sure Lindsay grew up in one of his houses, learning to service men before she was old enough to understand what was happening. I killed him. Not for money, not for honor. For my baby girl sleeping in her bed, who would never know what monsters looked like until it was too late. Self-defense isn't clean. I broke his neck with my hands, felt his spine snap, heard his men scream revenge. So I ran. Changed my name. Became Mitch Carlson, single father, quiet man who worked construction and told his daughter bedtime stories in Korean. If you're reading this, I'm dead. And whoever killed me probably thought they were avenging a traitor. They weren't. They were finishing what corruption started. Tell my daughter I'm sorry. Sorry I couldn't be the father she deserved. Sorry I brought this world's violence to her doorstep. Sorry I loved her so much I couldn't stay and watch them destroy her. And tell whoever reads this. Some sins are worth dying for. Protecting a child, exposing evil, choosing love over loyalty to monsters. I regret nothing. Mitch Park. Silence crashed down like a physical weight. Seung-han's hands shook so violently the letter slipped from his fingers, drifting to the concrete floor between them. His breathing came harsh and ragged, each inhale sounding like it cost him something vital. "He killed Dae-hyun to protect you," he whispered. "My brother was going to." His voice broke completely. Lindsay watched him shatter. Watched 15 years of certainty, of righteous anger, of purpose built on what he'd thought was truth, crumble into ash. "Your father," she said quietly, "knew. He protected the trafficking, maybe even ordered it." "No." But the word held no conviction. Seung-han pressed his palms against his eyes. "No. He wouldn't have. You know he would have." She picked up the bank statements, handed them to him. "Look, every payment, every shipment, your father's signature on half these documents." He looked, and she watched him inside. His father had been many things: brutal, efficient, demanding. But Seung-han had believed, somewhere deep down, that the cruelty served a purpose, that the violence built something worth protecting. Now he knew the truth. His empire was built on the broken bodies of girls who'd trusted the wrong promises. "I killed a man who was trying to save children," Seung-han said, voice hollow. "I hunted him for 15 years, made it my mission. My brother's death became my purpose." He looked at Lindsay and his eyes were devastated. "And he was the hero. My family were the monsters." "Yes." The confirmation landed like a blade. Seung-han stood abruptly, stumbled to the wall, pressed his forehead against the cold concrete. His shoulders shook. Lindsay had imagined this moment 1,000 times, had wanted to watch him break, wanted him to feel every ounce of pain she'd felt. Revenge had tasted sweet in her fantasies, but watching him now, this dangerous man reduced to trembling silence, she felt no triumph, only profound sadness for all the ways violence had destroyed both their families. She moved to him slowly, stood behind him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his body, close enough to hear his ragged breathing. "My whole life," he whispered. "I thought I was avenging honor, building something better, cleaning up my father's mistakes." He laughed bitterly. "But I've just been perpetuating the same rot, different name, same poison. You didn't know." "I should have." He turned to face her, and tears tracked down his face unchecked. "I should have asked questions, investigated. Instead, I just accepted the story they told me. My brother, the hero. Your father, the traitor. Simple, clean, easy to justify anything when you believe you're on the right side." Lindsay reached up, touched his face. Her fingers came away wet with his tears. "You can choose," she said softly, "to repeat your father's sins, or you can bury them." His hand covered hers, pressing her palm against his cheek. "How?" "By being different, by ending what they started." She stepped closer, close enough that her breath mixed with his. "By choosing me, choosing us, choosing to break this cycle instead of feeding it. I don't deserve. Neither of us deserves anything." Her other hand came up, framing his face. "But we can choose each other anyway. We can choose to build something that isn't built on blood and lies." Seung-han's arms came around her, pulling her close with desperate strength. He buried his face in her neck, and she felt his tears soak into her skin. This powerful, terrifying man, reduced to someone who needed comfort, who needed her. She held him, ran her fingers through his hair. Let him break, because sometimes breaking was the only way to rebuild. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her skin. "For killing your father. For everything my family did. For the girls they hurt. I'm sorry, and I know it's not enough, but—" "Shh," she pressed her lips to his temple. "You didn't know. You were lied to, used, made into a weapon by people who should have loved you better. That doesn't excuse." "No, but it explains. An explanation is the first step to doing better." She pulled back enough to look into his eyes. "My father wrote that letter knowing someone would find it, knowing the truth would come out. He wanted whoever killed him to understand. He wanted his death to mean something. What do I do now?" The question came out broken, lost. "You choose," Lindsay said firmly. "You choose to end it all. The blood, the silence, the lies. You use your power to dismantle what your father built. You make sure no more girls disappear into containers. You become what you thought you were. Someone who protects instead of destroys." Seung-han searched her face. "And you'll help me?" "Yes." "Why?" "After everything I've done, why would you?" "Because my father didn't run away from your family just to have me become another casualty of their war." Her voice strengthened. "He ran so I could choose something different, so I could break the cycle. And I choose you. Not because you're perfect, not because you're redeemed, but because you're willing to try." His forehead dropped to hers. They breathed the same air, standing in a storage unit that held all the evidence of their father's failures, and chose something impossible. "Then let's end it all," he whispered. "The blood, the silence, the lies. Let's burn it down and build something clean from the ashes. Together? Together." He kissed her, soft and desperate and filled with promise. "You and me. Against everyone who built this nightmare." When they finally left the storage unit, the evidence secured in boxes they'd load into his car, Chicago's skyline glowed in the distance. Somewhere in that sprawl of light and shadow, their enemies waited. The people who'd profited from his family's sins, the rivals who'd want them both dead. But they walked out holding hands. Two people from different worlds, bound by blood and trauma and choice. The war wasn't over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But for the first time in 15 years, Seung-han felt something other than the cold weight of revenge. He felt purpose, real purpose. The kind that came from choosing right over easy. And beside him, Lindsay Carlson walked with her father's courage and her own fierce determination, ready to finish what Mitch had started. The circle would break, the trafficking would end, the lies would burn, and love, impossible and fierce, would be their weapon. The call came at 4 a.m. Lindsay woke to Seung-han's phone lighting up the darkness of his bedroom, his body going rigid beside her. They'd fallen asleep on top of the covers, exhausted from the storage unit, from revelations and tears, still clothed but tangled together like they couldn't bear distance. He answered in Korean, voice sharp with authority masking fear. She watched his expression change, watched color drain from his face. "What?" She sat up, already knowing it was bad. He lowered the phone slowly. "Palazzo Nero is burning." They dressed in silence, moved with the efficiency of soldiers preparing for battle. Seung-han made calls while driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, jaw clenched so tight she could see muscle jumping beneath his skin. The restaurant came into view like a vision from hell. Flames poured from shattered windows. Smoke billowed black against the purple dawn sky. Fire trucks surrounded the building, their lights painting everything in urgent red and blue. Police formed barricades. Onlookers gathered, phones out, recording disaster. Lindsay climbed out of the car before it fully stopped. Ran toward the building even as firefighters shouted for her to stay back. Seung-han caught her, held her against his chest as she fought him. "Let me go, there might be people inside. The night staff, the cleaners. They're gone." His voice was hollow. "Marcus got the call 20 minutes ago. 5 people were inside. Security found them in the kitchen, throats slit before the fire started." Lindsay stopped struggling, went completely still. "Who?" "Teresa, Miguel, Young, Sue, both Toms." He recited the names like a prayer. Like by naming them he could keep them alive. People we knew, people who just worked here, who had nothing to do with any of this. Her knees gave out. Seung-han lowered them both to the ground, and they knelt on the cold pavement watching everything burn. The restaurant where she'd served champagne and kept her head down, where she'd called him a dog and changed both their fates, where 5 innocent people had died because someone wanted to send a message. "Beck family," Seung-han said quietly. Marcus appeared beside them, his face grim. "Had to be. They've been circling for months, waiting for weakness." "This was a message," Marcus added. "Kill his property, his people, show that he's distracted, show that his power is slipping because he's—" He stopped, glanced at Lindsay. "Because he's what?" she asked, voice deadly calm. "Because you've made him soft," Marcus said bluntly. "That's what they think. Seung-han keeps a black woman in his penthouse, spends his time unraveling his own family's history instead of solidifying territory, looks weak, distracted, in love." The last word landed like an accusation. Lindsay stood slowly. Seung-han's hand fell away from her arm. She walked closer to the flames, feeling heat lick her face, watching everything that had been turned to ash and ember. Behind Hare, she heard Seung-han stand, heard him move beside Hare. "I should have seen this coming," he said. "Should have anticipated. My father ran from his war." Lindsay's voice cut through his self-recrimination. "He ran because he had me to protect. Because staying meant I'd get caught in the crossfire. He chose my life over finishing what he started." "Lindsay, I'm not my father." She turned to face him, and something had shifted in her expression, something hard and unbreakable. "I don't have a child to protect. I don't have anything left to lose except you, and I won't run. Not from the Beck family. Not from anyone who thinks 5 innocent deaths will make me disappear." Seung-han studied her face, saw something there that made him go very still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we use my father's files, the evidence, the money he never spent." Her eyes reflected flames. "We use everything he gathered to dismantle not just your family's operation, but everyone who's still running it. The Beck family, the politicians they've paid off, the police who look the other way, all of it. That's a war. Then we go to war." She stepped closer. "You told me you wanted to end the blood, the silence, the lies. Here's your chance. They think you're weak? Show them what real power looks like. Not fear, not violence, but exposure, truth, burning everything down with evidence they can't hide from." Marcus cleared his throat. "Boss, she's right. We have 17 years of documentation in that storage unit. Financial records, names, shipping manifests, everything Mitch Park collected. We use it right. We don't just hurt the Beck family. We destroy the entire network. People will die," Seung-han said quietly. "Our people, innocents caught in the crossfire. Once we start this, there's no taking it back. 5 people already died." Lindsay's voice shook with fury she'd been containing. Teresa was saving money for her daughter's quinceañera. Miguel was supporting his grandmother. Young Soo sent half his paycheck back to Korea. They died because someone wanted to hurt you through me. Through us. She grabbed his jacket, pulled him close. "So let's give them the war they started. But we fight it our way. Clean, strategic. We expose them all." Seung-han's hands came up to cover hers. "You understand what you're signing up for? Once you step into this, really step into it, there's no going back to being invisible. No going back to being the waitress no one looked at." "Good." Lindsay's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because I'm done being invisible. I'm done being quiet. I'm done letting monsters think they can burn my world and walk away. Around them, the fire continued to rage. Firefighters shouted orders. The restaurant's facade collapsed inward with a groan of surrendering metal and stone. Everything that had been was dying in flames. But from the ashes, something else was being born. Seung-han pulled her close, pressed his lips to her forehead. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of decision, of commitment, of choosing the hard path because it was right. Okay, he said. We do this together. We use your father's evidence. We expose everything. We end it. He pulled back to look at her. But we're smart about it. Calculated. We don't just burn bridges. We build better ones while the old ones fall. How? The women your father saved. Some of them are still alive. Still in Chicago. We find them. Protect them. Give them platform to tell their stories. His mind was racing now, strategy replacing grief. We contact federal prosecutors. Give them everything on silver platter. Make it impossible to ignore. The Beck family will retaliate, Marcus warned. Let them. Lindsay's voice was cold. Certain. Let them come at us with everything they have. We'll be ready. And when they do, we'll have FBI, Homeland Security, and every news outlet in America watching. Seung-han looked at her like he was seeing her fully for the first time. Not the waitress, not the victim, but the warrior she'd always been, hidden beneath survival's disguise. You're terrifying, he said with something like awe. I'm my father's daughter. She turned back to the burning building. He taught me to survive, but you're teaching me something different. You're teaching me to fight. As dawn broke over Chicago, painting the smoke-filled sky in shades of blood, orange, and ash gray, they stood together watching Palazzo Nero collapse. The building that had brought them together, where she'd called him a dog, where their impossible story had begun. Now it was gone, reduced to rubble and memory, but they remained, standing, united, ready. Seung-han's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is just the beginning. The black bitch will burn next. Then you. Beck. He showed it to Lindsay. Watched for fear. For hesitation. Instead, she smiled. Cold. Dangerous. Beautiful. Tell him, she said quietly, that I'm done burning. Now I'm the fire. Seung-han typed the response. Hit send. And somewhere in the city, in a different penthouse, a different king of a different empire read those words and understood. The game had changed. The rules had shifted. And the woman they'd tried to threaten had just declared war. Marcus moved closer, his expression grave but determined. What do you need from me, boss? Everything, Seung-han said. Contact our people, the loyal ones. Tell them we're restructuring. Anyone involved in trafficking, protection rackets targeting vulnerable populations, anything that exploits the powerless, they're out. Effective immediately. Boss, that's half our operation. Then we'll rebuild with the other half. His voice was steel. We're done being what my father built. We're going to be something different. Something that doesn't require innocence burning to maintain power. Lindsay watched him transform. Watched the man she'd been falling for become someone even more compelling. Someone choosing right over easy. Someone willing to burn his own empire to build something clean. Your people won't all follow, she said quietly. I know, some will defect to Beck. Some will try to kill me. He met her eyes. That's why I need you sharp, strategic. You have distance from this world. You see clearly what I can't. You're going to help me navigate this transition without getting everyone killed. What am I? Your consigliere? The word came out half joking, but Seung-han's expression was dead serious. Yes, exactly that. My advisor, my partner, He stopped, searched for the word. Your equal, she finished. Yes. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Boss, the men aren't going to respect. They'll respect her, or they'll leave. Seung-han's voice brooked no argument. Lindsay's father exposed the rot in my family, saved 17 women, died protecting his daughter from our world. That takes more courage than any enforcer I've ever employed. If my people can't see that, can't respect that, then they were never really loyal to begin with. Lindsay felt something crack open in her chest. Not breaking, blooming. For years she'd made herself small, invisible, trying to escape her father's shadow, trying to pretend she was normal, ordinary, safe. But she'd never been ordinary, had never been safe. She was Mitch Park's daughter, Mitch Carlson's legacy. A woman who spoke Korean like a weapon and carried her father's courage like armor. And now, standing in the ruins of her old life, she was becoming something new, something powerful, something that would make her father proud. "Then let's get to work," she said. "We have evidence to organize, federal prosecutors to contact, women to protect, and an empire to burn down." Seung-han took her hand, threaded his fingers through hers. Together? Together. As they walked back to his car, passing firefighters and police and gawkers with their phones, Lindsay felt the weight of her father's ghost lift slightly. He'd run to protect her, had spent 15 years hiding, surviving, keeping her safe. But she was grown now, strong now, and she wouldn't dishonor his sacrifice by running from the fight he'd started. She would finish it, with Seung-han beside her, with truth as her weapon, with love as her armor. The war had begun, and this time the monster's daughter was ready. 3 weeks later, everything came to a head in an abandoned factory on Chicago's South Side. The building had been a meatpacking plant once, before the jobs dried up and the industry moved on. Now it was just empty space and rust, graffiti covering walls that had watched a century of labor and blood. Perfect place for a reckoning. Lindsay stood near the center of the vast room, hands steady despite her racing heart. She'd dressed practically. Dark jeans, boots, leather jacket that concealed the knife her father had given her years ago. Her hair was pulled back tight, no distractions, nothing for an enemy to grab. Seung-han was behind her, flanked by Marcus and 3 other men she'd learned to trust in the last few weeks. Not many. The restructuring of his organization had been brutal. Half his people had defected. Several had tried to kill him. 2 were dead now. But those who remained were loyal, real loyal, the kind forged in fire. "You don't have to do this," Seung-han said quietly, his hand brushing her back. "I can handle Baek Jae-sung. He burned my workplace, killed my friends, called me." She paused, remembering the text. "Called me a black bitch who would burn next." Her voice was ice. "No, this one's mine." Across the factory floor, doors opened. Baek Jae-sung entered with his own entourage. Older than Seung-han, maybe 50, with silver streaking his hair and eyes that had seen every kind of cruelty. He moved with the confidence of someone who'd never lost, who didn't believe he could lose. Behind him came 6 men, all armed, all dangerous. But Beck's eyes locked on Lindsay and stayed there, assessing, dismissing. She'd seen that look her whole life. The look that said she wasn't threat enough to worry about. She let him think it, let him underestimate her. Just like she'd let everyone underestimate her for 28 years. Seung-han. Baek's voice carried across the empty space. He spoke in Korean, probably assuming she wouldn't understand. "I see you brought your pet." Seung-han started to respond, but Lindsay stepped forward. Answered in the same language, her Busan accent sharp as the blade at her hip. "I'm no one's pet. But tell me, Baek Jae-sung, how does it feel knowing a waitress is about to end your empire?" The old man's eyebrows rose, his men shifted, hands moving toward weapons. "You speak Korean?" He studied her with new interest. "Unusual." "Seung-han, where did you find this one?" "She found me," Seung-han said, moving to stand beside Lindsay. "United front, equal partners. And before this goes any further, you should know, the federal prosecutors have everything. Every shipment, every payment, every name. Mitch Park's files. 17 years of documentation. We gave it to them 3 days ago." Silence. Then Baek laughed. Long, genuine, cruel. "You think the federal government scares me? Half of them are on our payroll. The ones who aren't can be bought. You're young, Seung. You don't understand how this works. Evidence disappears. Witnesses recant. Money talks louder than truth." "Maybe," Lindsay said. "But it's harder to disappear when CNN has copies, when the New York Times has sources, when 17 women you trafficked 15 years ago are ready to testify, ready to put their faces on camera, ready to tell the world what you did to them." Baek's smile faded. We didn't just go to federal prosecutors, Seung-han continued. We went to journalists, human rights organizations, international tribunals. Your operation isn't just exposed in Chicago. It's exposed everywhere. Korea knows. America knows. The world is watching. You destroyed both our organizations. Beck's voice turned venomous. You think you're heroic? You're a fool, a traitor to your own kind. And for what? For this black whore who? Lindsay moved. Not toward him. Toward one of his men. The youngest one, barely 20, who'd been watching her with something like doubt in his eyes. She stopped in front of him, close enough that he had to look down to meet her gaze. How old was your sister when they took her? She asked in Korean. Soft, gentle. The young man's face went white. I saw the files, Lindsay continued. Park Young, my 17 years old, promised a job at a restaurant in Los Angeles. Instead, she ended up in a house in Cicero where men paid by the hour. She paused. She killed herself 6 months later, hung herself with bedsheets while Baek Jae-sung counted money in the next room. Shut your mouth. But the young man's voice shook. Your mother sent you to work for him anyway. Told you it was honorable. Told you the Baek family would take care of you. Lindsay's eyes bored into his. But they killed your sister. Used her until she couldn't take it anymore. And they'd do the same to anyone else they could profit from. The young man's hand moved toward his weapon. Lindsay didn't flinch, didn't step back, just waited. Do it, she said quietly. Pull that gun. Shoot me. Prove your loyalty to the man who destroyed your family. Or, she paused, or walk away. Choose something different. Choose to be the man your sister needed you to be. The moment stretched, infinite, impossible. Then the young man's hand fell away from his weapon. He took one step back, then another, then turned and walked toward the door. Coward, Baek roared. I'll kill your entire family. Try it, Seung-han said, voice cold. Every threat you make is being recorded. Every word is evidence. You're done, Baek. The only question now is whether you leave here in handcuffs or a body bag. 3 more of Baek's men shifted, uncertain. The tide was turning and they could feel it. You burned Palazzo Nero, Lindsay said, her voice carrying across the factory floor. You killed Teresa, Miguel, Young, Sue, both Toms. People who never hurt anyone. People who just worked for a living. You killed them to send a message. To make me afraid. To make Seung-han look weak. She pulled the knife from her jacket. Her father's knife. The one he'd carried when he was still Mitch Park. The one that had killed Seung Dae-hyun in self-defense 15 years ago. This blade ended your partner's son, she said, letting light catch the steel. My father used it to protect me from a monster. Now I'm going to use it to end your empire. Not by killing you, she smiled without warmth, but by making sure you live long enough to watch everything you built turn to ash. Baek lunged. Fast for his age. Pulled a weapon. Aimed at Lindsay. She moved on instinct. Years of her father's training, ducked low, came up inside his guard. The knife slashed across his wrist. Not deep enough to kill. Just enough to make him drop the gun. Then she was behind him, blade against his throat. Not cutting, just pressing. A promise. You called me a dog, she whispered in his ear. Thought I'd crawl, thought I'd burn. But here's the truth, old man. I'm no one's dog. I'm the daughter of the man who exposed you, the woman who dismantled your empire, the black girl who speaks better Korean than your own men. She pressed the blade harder. So tell me, who's crawling now? Seung-han appeared at her side, weapon trained on Baek's remaining men. Let him go, Lindsay. She wanted to cut. Wanted to make him bleed for Teresa, for Miguel, for all of them. Her hand shook with the effort of restraint. Let him go, Seung-han repeated gentler. Death is easy. Living with defeat is punishment. Let him watch everything fall. Let him see the women he hurt testify. Let him spend his last years in federal prison knowing a waitress destroyed him. Lindsay held Baek for one more moment, then released him, stepped back. The knife remained in her hand, steady now. Ready. Baek stumbled forward, turned to face them both. Blood dripped from his wrist. His face was twisted with rage and humiliation. This isn't over, he spat. I have resources, connections. You think, it's over. Seung-han's voice was final. FBI is outside right now. They let us in to say what needed saying. To give you chance to walk away with whatever dignity remains. But that chance expires in about 30 seconds. As if summoned, doors opened. Federal agents poured in, weapons drawn, voices shouting commands. Bake's men dropped their guns, raised hands, surrendered. But Bake himself stood frozen, staring at Lindsay like she was something he couldn't comprehend, something that shouldn't exist. "How?" he finally asked. "How does a black woman destroy everything I built?" Lindsay smiled. "The same way a black man with perfect Korean saved 17 women 15 years ago, by choosing right over easy, by refusing to bow to monsters." She stepped closer, close enough that he could see every ounce of her father's courage in her eyes. "You should have remembered, the people you underestimate are the ones who end you." Federal agents grabbed Beck, cuffed him, read rights he'd never respected. As they dragged him toward the door, he looked back once. Met Lindsay's gaze. She didn't look away, didn't show mercy. Just stood there with her father's knife in her hand and her lover beside her, watching justice. Imperfect, insufficient, but real. Finally arrive. When the factory emptied, when it was just Lindsay and Seung-han and the few people they trusted, silence settled like dust. "You could have killed him," Seung-han said quietly. "I know. Why didn't you?" Lindsay looked at the knife in her hand. Her father's blade. The weapon that had protected her before she knew she needed protecting. "Because my father taught me that killing is easy. Killing solves one problem and creates 10 more." She met Seung-han's eyes. "But justice. Real justice. That's harder. That requires living with the messy consequences, letting the system work even when it's slow and imperfect. You think he'll actually pay? I think 17 women are going to testify. I think federal prosecutors have 17 years of evidence. I think the world is watching now." She paused. "And I think even if he buys his way to reduce sentence, he'll spend every day knowing a black woman who spoke his language destroyed his empire with the truth." Seung-han pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "You're terrifying and beautiful, and I don't deserve you." "No," she agreed. "But you're trying to. And that's enough." They walked out together as dawn broke over Chicago. The factory behind them, the evidence submitted, the testimony scheduled, the reckoning delivered. Not perfect, not clean, but real. And for the first time since her father's death, Lindsay felt something like peace settle in her chest. Not absolution, not forgetting, but the knowledge that she'd finished what he started, that his sacrifice hadn't been in vain, that love and justice could coexist, even when forged in blood and fire. 6 months later, Palazzo Nero rose from ashes. Not rebuilt exactly as it was. Better, cleaner. The new design incorporated light where shadows had been. Glass where walls had hidden secrets. Every architectural choice was intentional. Transparency over concealment. Lindsay stood in the center of the dining room, watching workers install the final pieces. The memorial plaque gleamed on the eastern wall, bronze letters catching afternoon light. In memory of Teresa Valdez, Miguel Santos, Park Young, Sue, Thomas Chen Sr., and Thomas Chen Jr. They served with dignity. They died with honor. They are remembered with love. Beneath their names, her father's quote in both Korean and English. "Some sins are worth dying for. Protecting a child, exposing evil, choosing love over loyalty to monsters." "It's beautiful," a voice said behind her. Lindsay turned to find Soon-hee, one of the women her father had saved 15 years ago. She was 40 now, gray threading through her dark hair, but her eyes were clear. Surviving eyes. Thriving eyes. "You think they'd approve?" Lindsay asked. "I think they'd be proud." Soon, he moved to stand beside her, studying the plaque. "Your father saved my life. I was 19. They promised me work at a restaurant. Instead..." She stopped, breathed. "Instead, your father broke down a door and carried me out. I was pregnant, terrified. He got me to a safe house, helped me find legitimate work, checked on me for years until he had to disappear." "I never knew," Lindsay said softly. "He never told me what he did, just taught me Korean and said someday I'd understand why heritage mattered. He protected you from the weight of it. But he'd want you to know now, he saved 17 of us. 17 women who got to live because he chose right over easy. Soon, he touched the plaque gently. And now his daughter finished what he started. Destroyed the people who'd still be trafficking if you hadn't exposed them. Through the window, Lindsay could see Seung-han directing construction on the building's exterior. He'd shed the expensive suits for jeans and work boots, getting his hands dirty alongside the crew. Rebuilding, literally and figuratively. The trial had been brutal. Baek Jae-sung was serving 40 years federal, his entire network dismantled. But the process had exposed things about Seung-han's family too, things that couldn't be ignored or buried. So he'd made a choice. Dissolved the criminal enterprises, kept the legitimate businesses, construction, import, real estate. All of it clean now, vetted by lawyers who specialized in compliance rather than loopholes. He'd lost wealth, lost power, lost the fear-based respect he'd commanded. But he'd gained something more valuable. The ability to sleep at night. "Miss Carlson?" A young woman approached, nervous, college age, with a tablet and eager eyes. "The journalist from the Tribune is here for your interview." Lindsay had become a reluctant public figure. The woman who'd taken down a trafficking ring, the black daughter of a Korean whistleblower, the survivor who'd turned evidence into justice. She'd been offered book deals, movie rights, speaking engagements. She'd turned most of it down, but she'd agreed to a few interviews, to a small foundation that helped youth caught between gang families, to using her story where it might actually help. "Send them to the office upstairs," Lindsay said. "I'll be there in 5. Soon he squeezed her hand. "You're doing good work, both of you. We're trying. That's more than most people do." "Soon," he smiled. "I have to go pick up my daughter from school. But I'll see you at the opening gala next week. You'll be guest of honor, all 17 of you." After soon he left, Lindsay stood alone with the memorial plaque. She touched each name, whispered prayers in Korean and English. Mixed language for mixed grief. "They'd forgive you, you know," Seung-han said, materializing beside her like he always did when she was lost in thought. "For not saving them, for being human. I know. But knowing didn't ease the weight. I keep thinking, if I'd challenged you sooner, if I'd exposed everything before Beck retaliated, they'd still be dead, just different circumstances, different enemy." He turned her to face him, hands gentle on her shoulders. "You can't carry every death. You can only honor them by living better." Lindsay looked up at him. 6 months had changed him. Softened some edges while sharpening others. He smiled more, laughed occasionally. But he also moved through the world with heightened awareness of consequence. Every decision weighed. Every action measured. "How's the foundation paperwork?" she asked, changing subject before grief swallowed her. "Filed. Official as of yesterday. The Youth Restoration Initiative, funded by money from your father's storage unit. The 15 million that was just sitting there gathering dust." He paused. It felt right. Using money stolen from traffickers to help kids escape gang life. He'd approve. "Think so?" "I know so." She leaned into him, let his warmth steady her. "My father believed in redemption, in people choosing better. That's why he kept the money instead of spending it. Insurance, but also faith that someday it could be used right." Seung-han's arms came around her, solid and safe. "I never thought I'd be here. Running a legitimate construction company, dating a woman who terrifies me, trying to be someone my brother would barely recognize." "Dating?" Lindsay pulled back enough to look at him, eyebrow raised. "After 6 months of living together, surviving a gang war, and dismantling a crime empire, you think we're dating?" He laughed, and the sound still surprised her. Joy from a man who'd forgotten how to feel it. "What would you call it?" "Surviving each other. Building something impossible." She touched his face, felt the slight stubble on his jaw. "Falling in love despite every reason we shouldn't." "Yeah," he said softly. "That." They stood like that for a moment, surrounded by construction noise and new beginning, holding on to each other like anchors in a storm that had finally passed. "I have something for you," Seung-han said. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Lindsay's heart stopped. "If that's what I think it is, it's not." He opened it to reveal a key. "Well, not just that." Lindsay took the key, turned it over. "What does it open?" "A choice. He led her to the window, pointed to the building across the street. I bought it. Was going to develop it into condos, but I thought... He paused, vulnerable in a way that still made her ache. I thought maybe you'd want to turn it into something else. A community center, a safe house, a school. Whatever you think would honor your father's memory and help the neighborhood. Tears pricked her eyes. Sung-han, you don't have to decide now, but I want you to know. Everything I have, everything I build from here, it's ours. Not mine, not yours, ours. He took her free hand, threaded his fingers through hers. Because you made me believe I could be something other than my father's son, and I want to spend the rest of my life proving you right. That's not a proposal, she said, but her voice shook with emotion. No, not yet. Because when I propose, I want it to be in a world where we've both healed more, where the foundation is running, where this restaurant is full of life instead of ghosts, where we've proven to ourselves that love built in chaos can survive in peace. Lindsay kissed him. Soft, deliberate, full of promise. But I will propose, he murmured against her lips. Probably at table 9. The same place where you called me a dog and changed my entire life. Table 9 doesn't exist anymore. We redesigned the floor plan, remember? Then I'll recreate it, just for that moment. He pulled back, eyes serious. You didn't answer me, though. The building across the street. What do you want to do with it? Lindsay looked out at the structure. Old, run down, full of potential. A school, she said finally, for kids who don't fit anywhere else. Mixed heritage kids, kids from immigrant families, kids caught between languages and cultures and expectations. She turned back to him. We'll teach them Korean, English, Spanish, whatever they need. And we'll teach them that being different isn't weakness, it's power. Perfect. Sung-han kissed her forehead. We'll start planning tomorrow. Tomorrow I have interviews. The Tribune, remember? Right. Then the day after. The day after I have testimony prep. Beck's appeals process starts next month. Lindsay. He caught her face in his hands, made her look at him. When do you rest? When the work is done. The work is never done. There's always another fight, another cause, another injustice. His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. But you have to rest anyway. Have to let yourself be human. Have to remember that surviving isn't the same as living. She knew he was right. Had been running on adrenaline and purpose for 6 months straight, barely sleeping. Always moving. Afraid that if she stopped, the grief would catch up. I don't know how to rest anymore, she admitted. Don't know how to just exist without fighting or running or surviving. Then we'll learn together, he pressed his forehead to hers. Because I'm the same way. I've been movement and violence for so long, stillness feels like dying. So what do? We take it slow. One day at a time. We build the restaurant, run the foundation, create the school, but we also... He paused, searching for words. We also go to movies, cook dinner together, sleep late on Sundays. We do normal things that people who aren't constantly at war get to do. Normal, Lindsay repeated, testing the word. I'm not sure I remember what that feels like. Neither do I. But I want to find out. His eyes held hers, dark and certain. With you, only with you. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility, with hope, with the terrifying vulnerability of choosing peace after a lifetime of chaos. Okay, Lindsay said finally. We try. We build the restaurant and the foundation and the school. But we also rest, be human, figure out who we are when we're not fighting to survive. Deal. Sung-han sealed it with a kiss that tasted like promise and future and home. The restaurant opened 3 weeks later. The gala was small by Chicago standards. No politicians bought with bribes. No enforcers providing security through threat. Just people who'd earned their place through loyalty, through courage, through choosing right when it would have been easier to look away. The 17 women her father had saved sat at a long table near the memorial plaque, telling stories and laughing and surviving publicly. Soon he had brought her daughter, a beautiful teenager who wanted to be a lawyer, who'd grown up knowing she existed because a black man with perfect Korean had chosen her mother's life over his own safety. Lindsay moved through the crowd in a dress that was simple and elegant, deep blue that brought out the gold in her dark skin. Her hair was down for once, natural curls framing her face. She'd stopped hiding, stopped making herself small. She was Mitch Park's daughter, Mitch Carlson's legacy, and she wore both names with pride. "You look happy," Marcus said, appearing with champagne. He'd stayed loyal through everything, had helped restructure the organization, had become something like a friend. "I am," she realized. And it was true. Not the manic happiness of survival, but the quiet contentment of building something real. "Boss is looking for you," Marcus said. "Something about Table 9. Lindsay's heart jumped. "Table 9 doesn't exist. Check the corner, the eastern corner, where it used to be." She moved through the crowd, her pulse quickening. And there, in the exact spot where the original Table 9 had stood, where she'd called him a dog and changed both their fates, was a small table set for two. Seung-han stood beside it in a perfectly tailored suit, dragon tattoo visible above his collar, eyes locked on her as she approached. The crowd quieted. Whispers spread. Everyone knew what was happening except Lindsay, who'd somehow convinced herself he'd wait longer, would choose a more private moment, would. He knelt. The restaurant went completely silent. "Lindsay Carlson," he said, and his voice carried across the space. "6 months ago, you called me a dog in perfect Korean. You challenged me publicly. You made me question everything I thought I knew about power and family and what it meant to be strong." Tears already blurred her vision. "You showed me that monsters are only men who forgot they could be anything else. You taught me that revenge is a circle that only breaks when someone chooses something different, something harder." He pulled out a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light. "You made me believe I could be more than my father's son, more than violence and fear. You made me want to be the man you saw when you looked at me." He paused, and she saw his own eyes shining with emotion. "So I'm asking you here, at the table where it all started, in front of everyone who matters, will you marry me? Not because of who we were, but because of who we chose to become. Not despite the blood between our families, but because we survived it and built something beautiful from the ashes." Lindsay couldn't speak, could barely breathe. She looked at the man kneeling before her, this dangerous, complicated, beautiful man who'd killed her father, and then spent 6 months dismantling everything to build something clean. She looked at the memorial plaque honoring the dead. She looked at the 17 women who'd survived because her father chose right. She looked at the restaurant rebuilt from flames, at the foundation that would help hundreds of kids, at the school being constructed across the street. And she thought about her father's final words in that letter. "Some sins are worth dying for. Protecting a child, exposing evil, choosing love over loyalty to monsters." "Yes," she said, voice clear and strong. "Yes, I'll marry you. Because you're right. We're not who we were. We're who we chose to become. And I choose you. Every day. Despite everything. Because of everything." Seung-han slipped the ring onto her finger, stood, pulled her into a kiss that the entire restaurant applauded. And in that moment, surrounded by survivors and believers and people who'd chosen hope over hate, Lindsay felt her father's presence like a benediction. "I'm proud of you, baby girl. You finished what I started. You broke the circle. You chose love." 6 months after that, they married in a small ceremony at Palazzo Nero. Table 9, recreated one final time for the occasion. Soon he and the 16 other women served as witnesses. Marcus stood as Seung-han's best man. The teenager who'd walked away from Beck's employment read a poem in Korean about second chances. They exchanged vows in both English and Korean, mixing languages like their lives had mixed, creating something new from two separate worlds. When the officiant pronounced them married, when Seung-han kissed his wife for the first time as her husband, the restaurant erupted in applause and joy and the messy, complicated triumph of people who'd survived impossible things. Later, much later, when the guests had gone and they stood alone in the restaurant that had witnessed their beginning and their becoming, Seung-han led Lindsay to the memorial plaque. "I want to add something," he said quietly. "If you'll allow it." "What?" He showed her a small metal plate, already engraved. Mitch Park. Mitch Carlson. Hero. Father. The man who broke the circle. Lindsay's breath caught. "You want to honor him?" After everything? He saved 17 women, exposed trafficking, died protecting you. He was everything I thought I was, but actually wasn't. Seung-han's voice was thick with emotion. He deserves to be remembered. Not as a traitor, but as what he really was. Someone who chose right when everyone around him chose easy. Lindsay touched the plate, traced her father's names with trembling fingers. He'd like that, being remembered in both languages, both names, both truths. They installed it together, below the other names, completing the memorial. And as they stood back to admire their work, Lindsay felt the weight she'd been carrying finally lift. Not completely. Some grief never fully heals. But enough that she could breathe. Could live. Could imagine a future that wasn't just survival. What now? She asked. Seung-han pulled her close. Now we live. We run the foundation. Build the school. Have kids someday who'll speak Korean and English and know their grandfather was a hero. He kissed the top of her head. We prove that love can break bloodlines, that people can choose to be better than their fathers, that revenge isn't the only inheritance worth keeping, and if it gets hard, then we fight together, but not with violence, with truth, with love, with the stubborn refusal to let our fathers' sins define our children's futures. They stood there as night deepened outside, the restaurant's lights casting warm gold across everything they'd built. Two people from different worlds who'd somehow found each other in chaos and chosen peace. Lindsay thought about the moment she'd called him a dog. How terrified she'd been. How reckless. How that single instant of defiance had changed absolutely everything. "Kenan niga anya?" she whispered. "Isn't the dog you?" Seung-han smiled. "No. The dog was never me. Or you. The dogs were the men who built empires on broken bodies and called it strength." He turned her to face him. "We're something different, something better, something that chose to be human even when the world taught us to be monsters." "I love you," Lindsay said. Simple. True. The most complicated truth she'd ever lived. "I love you too." He kissed her softly. "My wife. My partner. My salvation." Somewhere in whatever place the dead went, two fathers. One Korean and one black. Both destroyed by the world they'd tried to change, looked down at their children and smiled. The circle had broken, the revenge had ended, and love, fierce and impossible, had won. Not because it was easy, but because two people had chosen it anyway. Had chosen each other. Had chosen to build something clean from blood-soaked foundations. They turned off the restaurant lights together and walked out into Chicago's night, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. Because the war was over. The building was done. The foundation was running. And finally, after everything, they were just two people in love. Living. Not just surviving. Whole.